There were 12 people at my dinner table. The night my son pointed down the hall and told me to eat somewhere else. He said it quietly, the way people say things they want to pretend aren't as bad as they are. Dad, we're a little crowded in here. Why don't you take your plate to the study? You'll be more comfortable. More comfortable. I looked at the table. My table, solid oak, 400 pounds, bought at an estate sale in Roanoke the year my son was born, carried into this house by 3 men and a lot of profanity. Every face around it was turned slightly away from me, the way people look when they've agreed, without saying so, to let something happen. My daughter-in-law's father was at the head, my head, settled into my chair with his ankle crossed over his knee, and his Pinot Noir, brought for himself, not offered to anyone, resting in his hand. He looked up at me with the composed expression of a man who believes every room he enters has been waiting for him. "We appreciate the hospitality, Marvin," he said. Like I was running an inn, like I was the help. "My name is Marvin Kowalski. I'm 68 years old. I spent 31 years as a licensed electrician in Roanoke, Virginia, wiring houses, commercial buildings, the kind of work that leaves your hands rough and your back sore but lets you sleep at night because you know what you built holds. I have owned the house at 7 Birchwood Lane since 1991. My wife Frances and I raised our son in it. We spent 29 years inside its walls, before she passed 4 years ago quietly, on a Tuesday morning in April while I was making her tea downstairs. I am not a man who makes scenes. Frances used to say I absorbed things the way good insulation does, quietly, without complaint, without letting it show on the outside how much heat was actually moving through. She meant it as a compliment, and also, I think now, as a gentle warning I didn't know how to hear. I stood in the doorway of my own dining room holding my plate. I looked at my son. I thought about all the things I could have said. Instead, I went to the study. I set my plate on the desk where I had paid every bill and filed every tax return for 32 years, where I had sat with paperwork when Frances was sick and I needed somewhere to be besides wherever she was suffering. I sat down. I ate alone. I listened to the laughter coming through the wall. Before I go further, welcome to Daddy's Revenge Stories. If you're new here, drop a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from. I read every one of them. And I want you to know that what I'm about to share contains some details shaped for the purposes of telling it. Some names and specifics have been adjusted, but the truth underneath all of it is as real as anything I've ever said out loud. My son Aaron had moved in 2 years before that dinner. He was 37, worked in freelance project management, and had the particular gift of making requests sound like they were doing you a favor. My daughter-in-law Whitney was a year younger, polished in the way of a woman who'd grown up in a house where things were simply arranged to her family's preference, and who had never quite stopped expecting that to continue. The plan, as Aaron presented it, was simple. The housing market had gone sideways. They needed 18 months, maybe 2 years, to save for a down payment on something of their own. I had 4 bedrooms. It made sense. Frances would have said yes without hesitation, and I still believed at that point in honoring what Frances would have done. So I said yes. The first year was manageable. Aaron helped with the yard occasionally. Whitney learned which evenings I liked quiet. I made Sunday dinners. We ate together at that table like the family I believed we were. Then Whitney's parents started coming down from McLean more often. Weekends, then extended weekends, then a standing presence that nobody had formally invited, but that had quietly calcified into expectation. Her father, Reginald, was 67, a semi-retired commercial real estate developer with a handshake that functioned as an assessment. Her mother, Joyce, was warm in the practiced way of a woman who understood that pleasantness, deployed consistently, was its own form of authority. They did not look at me the way guests look at the person whose home they are staying in. They looked at me the way people look at a piece of furniture they are already mentally rearranging. I noticed. I told myself I was being uncharitable. I was trying to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, because Frances had always said that was the better instinct. I held on to that for a long time. The dinner party was Aaron's idea. An anniversary celebration, he said. Small gathering, close friends, Whitney's family. You don't have to do anything, Dad. We'll handle it. They did not handle it. I spent 2 days making Frances's pot roast and her apple cake, the one with the brown sugar crust that Aaron used to steal pieces of before it had even cooled. And I set the table and bought flowers for the centerpiece and pressed the tablecloth. Then I went to the study while 12 people ate in my dining room and Aaron topped off Reginald's wine. I don't know what time the last guest left. I was in bed by 9, not out of anger. Out of a tiredness that wasn't physical, the kind that settles in when you've been told something without words and have understood it completely. I woke at 2 in the morning with a dry throat, the way I always do. I pulled on my robe and went downstairs. The kitchen was mostly cleaned up. I gave them that. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the counter, and that was when I saw the magazine. Whitney's home design publication open on my kitchen table. I'd seen it in the stack by the sofa for months, never paid it much attention. But someone had been writing in the margins, small precise numbers in pencil, the kind you get from a tape measure, not an estimate. My kitchen is 14 feet by 11 feet 2 inches. That was exactly what was written beside a hand-sketched floor plan that showed the wall between the kitchen and living room pushed out, opened up. An open concept renovation, drawn in pencil, in my house, in someone else's handwriting. I took the magazine to my study. The security cameras had been my idea 4 years back, after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. 8 cameras, front, rear, both sides, garage, living room, upstairs hall, and the study itself. I had shown Aaron the setup when I installed it. He'd looked at his phone through most of the demonstration and said, "Dad, you've got the best monitored house on the block," and laughed in the way of a man who finds other people's caution slightly embarrassing. I opened the laptop, I logged in. I searched archived footage from a Thursday morning 3 weeks prior, a morning I'd spent at a doctor's appointment from 10 until noon. Aaron's truck left the driveway at 9:43. At 10:17, a silver Lexus pulled in. Reginald and Joyce. The side door opened. Aaron had given them the code. They were inside for 40 minutes. Reginald moved room to room with a yellow legal pad and a tape measure he'd brought in his jacket pocket. He measured the front room. He measured the master bedroom. He stood in the doorway of my study and wrote something down. Joyce photographed the closets with her phone. She opened the garage door and stood looking at the dimensions. Reginald joined her. They nodded at each other with the quiet efficiency of two people completing a task they had been planning for some time. I watched all 40 minutes without moving. Then I pulled up my bank account. Aaron and I had opened a joint maintenance account when he moved in. $500 a month from me, $250 from him for repairs and upkeep. In practice, I had funded it entirely after the first quarter, which Aaron had explained as temporary. In 18 months, the account showed one legitimate withdrawal for a water heater replacement I remembered authorizing. Everything else was Aaron. Transfers, withdrawals, irregular amounts. $900 to an account I didn't recognize. Over 18 months, $26,400. $82.16 remaining. I stared at that number for a while. Then I typed Aaron's name into the Virginia State Corporation Commission business entity search. 4 minutes later, I found what I was looking for. 2 years ago, Aaron had registered an LLC, a property management and consulting company. The registered business address was 7 Birchwood Lane. Under ownership, 2 names were listed: Aaron's and mine as co-owner and managing partner. I had never been asked. I had never signed anything. I had never heard the name of that company until that moment. I closed the laptop. I sat in my study in the dark and I thought about Frances. She had never said she didn't trust my daughter-in-law. She was too gracious for declarations like that, but she'd said it once, sideways, the way she said the things that cost her to say, that Whitney reminded her of a woman who had learned very early that the best way to get what you wanted was to make people feel chosen for providing it. She said it quietly, looking at the wall rather than at me. She said it once. Then she let it go, because she understood that I would need to arrive at it myself. I had arrived 4 years late, but I was there. In the morning, I called my attorney, Jack Hadley. He'd handled Frances's estate, the property retitling, everything. He answered on the first ring. I told him about the LLC. I told him about the account. I described what was on the camera footage. The LLC filing is the most serious piece, Jack said. Listing you as a co-owner without your signature is fraud, Marvin. Depending on what he's used that entity for, it could carry real consequences. What do I need to do? I'll have a letter drafted to a Charlottesville address by end of day, Jack said. I'll contact the commission for a correction on the ownership filing, and I'd recommend you close the joint account today. I called the bank next. I gave them Aaron's name. I removed him. I closed the account and moved the remaining $82 to a donation for the Roanoke Food Bank because I didn't want to look at it. At noon, a locksmith arrived and rekeyed every exterior lock in under 2 hours. Front door, back door, side entrance, garage. New keys, 2 copies, both in my pocket when he left. At 2, I sat with Levi Crane, a realtor I'd known since Frances and I bought the house. Levi had the unhurried manner of a man who understood that real estate transactions are almost always about something other than real estate. He walked the property with me, ran the numbers, and told me what a development group out of Blacksburg had been paying for corner lots in this zip code since a zoning change 6 months prior. I had known the house had value. I hadn't known it had that much. Private sale, I said. No open listing, fast and clean. Levi said he knew exactly who to call. That evening, I called my sister Lillian in Phoenix. She was 72, had spent 30 years as a pediatric nurse, had the composure of a woman who had delivered hard news so many times that she'd stopped confusing stillness with coldness. She loved Aaron. She had also, twice over the past year, started to say something to me about the arrangement at Birchwood and stopped when I changed the subject. "How much did you see?" I asked her, after I'd told her everything. A pause. "When he called this place the family house at Christmas 2 years ago, not your house, the family house, I noticed that. I didn't say anything because I knew you weren't ready to hear it." "You were right," I said. "I wouldn't have been." "What are you going to do?" "Everything I should have done earlier," I said. They came back on a Saturday afternoon, Aaron's truck, Whitney's Subaru, and the silver Lexus. 3 vehicles, same order they always arrived in, with the easy assumption of people returning to somewhere that expects them. I was in the front room reading the novel Frances had left bookmarked on the side table. She'd never gone back to it after she got sick. It was very good. I found I could concentrate on it completely, which told me something about the state of mind I'd arrived at. Aaron tried the garage clicker. Nothing. He tried twice more with the focused frown of a man who thinks the problem is mechanical and temporary. Then he got out and tried the side door with his key. The key turned freely. It opened nothing. He stepped back, looked at the key in his hand, looked at the door, looked at the key again, took out his phone. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. "Dad," his voice was careful, "something's wrong with the locks." "I know," I said. "Did you pause? Did you change them?" "Yes." "Can you come open the door? Whitney's parents are with us." "I'm coming," I said. I walked through the kitchen and out the front door at my own pace, not slow enough to be theatrical, not fast enough to suggest urgency. There was no urgency, everything was happening exactly as I'd expected. Aaron was at the side entrance. Whitney stood behind him, arms crossed, face arranged in the expression she used for situations that had deviated from her expectations. Reginald and Joyce were near the Lexus. Reginald had his hands in his pockets and was studying the front of the house with the appraising look of a man running a quiet calculation. That was when he noticed the sign. Levi's crew had put it up that morning, white background, red lettering, "For sale," planted at the edge of the front lawn, clean and legible from the street. Reginald's hands came slowly out of his pockets. "Marvin," Aaron's voice had dropped. "What is that?" "It's what it looks like," I said. "You're selling the house." "I've accepted a private offer. The paperwork is with my attorney." From the fence line between our properties, Herb Damon was watching. Herb was 70, a retired firefighter, had lived next door since 1999. He had helped me hang drywall in the garage on a Saturday in 2001 in exchange for a case of Budweiser and dinner. He had sat with me in a hospital parking lot at midnight 4 years ago and asked nothing of me except to be there. He was standing at his fence line now, planted, and his expression was the clear and particular expression of a man who has decided to be a witness and intends to do it properly. "This is our home," Aaron said. His voice was rising. "Dad, we live here." "You lease an apartment in Charlottesville," I said. "I have a copy of the lease. You've been staying here temporarily. That was always the arrangement. We were planning to buy you out. We've discussed this." "You've mentioned it," I said. "We've never discussed it." Reginald stepped forward with the confident posture of a man accustomed to entering disagreements as the solution. "Marvin, I think what everyone needs right now is a conversation between adults. You've made some significant decisions here without consulting whom?" I said. He stopped. "This property has one name on the deed," I said. "Mine. There is no one I'm required to consult." I looked at him steadily. "I also have 37 minutes of security footage from 3 weeks ago, if anyone would like to see it. You and Joyce, tape measure, my master bedroom." Joyce took a small step backward, involuntary, the movement of someone whose body has understood something before the mind has settled on how to respond. "Aaron let us in," Whitney said. She was not looking at her father. She was looking at her husband. Her voice was quiet, and the quiet was not calm. It was the quiet of something being held very tightly. "He asked us to come. He said you might be selling, and he wanted my dad to give us an idea of what the place could be worth." Aaron's jaw moved. He said nothing. I reached into my jacket and took out 3 folded pages, a printout Jack had messengered over that morning. "This is from the Virginia State Corporation Commission," I said. I held it out toward Aaron. "Your LLC, registered 2 years ago. My name is on it as co-owner." I let that sit for a moment. "Tell me when I signed that." He looked at the pages but did not take them. "It was for the business bank account," he started. "The bank needed a second name too." "That is fraud," I said. "Not as an accusation, as a fact delivered without decoration. Jack Hadley has already filed the correction with the commission. The joint maintenance account is also closed. I folded the pages. $26,000, Aaron, over 18 months. Whitney turned to look at her husband with the slow, deliberate attention of a woman recalculating every assumption she had made about what she knew. What maintenance account, she said. It was not a question. Aaron said nothing. Reginald picked his jacket up from the hood of the Lexus. He put it on without looking at Aaron, without looking at any of us. He looked at Joyce. Something passed between them in the silent, practiced shorthand of two people who have been married long enough to conduct entire negotiations without speaking. "We'll find a hotel," Reginald said, to Whitney, not to Aaron. The distinction was exact and deliberate. He walked around to the passenger side of the Lexus. Joyce followed. Neither of them looked at the for sale sign as they passed it, with the specific determination of people refusing to acknowledge a thing they had been counting on and have decided to pretend was never part of the plan. The Lexus backed out and drove away. Whitney watched the car until it turned the corner. Then she looked at Aaron for a long moment. She picked up her keys. "You told me we had a plan," she said. "You told me everything was being handled." She looked at him the way you look at something you built carefully and have just watched come apart. "You let my parents come in here with a tape measure, Aaron. You put my father in the middle of something you never even told me about." She got in her car. She sat in the driver's seat for a long moment without starting the engine. Then the engine started, and she pulled away in the direction opposite to her parents. Aaron stood alone in the driveway. He did not say anything for a while. He was doing what I had done the night I first found the magazine. The first night any of this was real. He was finishing the arithmetic on something he had managed, for a long time, to keep unfinished. And the arithmetic was done now, and the answer was not the one he'd been assuming. He sat down on the front step, not dramatically, just sat, the way a man sits when the energy required to remain upright is no longer available. Herb Damon crossed from his yard to mine. He sat down beside my son on the step and did not say a word, just sat there the same way he had once sat with me in a hospital parking lot at midnight, offering nothing except his presence, which was the only thing that had helped. I watched them from where I was standing. Then I walked over and sat down on the other side of my son. "I don't know when it changed," Aaron said. He was looking at the driveway. "I don't know the exact moment I stopped seeing this as your house and started seeing it as..." He couldn't finish. "I know when it started," I said. "You stopped calling it your mother's house about a year after she died. You started saying the property. Just once in a while, I noticed. I didn't say anything, and that was my mistake." I paused. "I made it very easy to take me for granted, Aaron. I fixed things before they became consequences. I paid for things without being asked. I made myself so available that you eventually stopped being able to see me as anything except available. That's on me as much as it's on you." He looked at me then. His eyes were red. "I was going to put the money back," he said. "The Charlottesville project." "I know," I said. "That's not how it works, and you know that." He was quiet. "You have things to sort out," I said. "The commission will be in touch about the LLC. The maintenance account is closed. There's a 60-day notice at your Charlottesville address from Jack." I looked out at the 4L sign, catching the late afternoon light. "I'm not trying to end you. I need you to understand that. I'm finishing something that should have had clear edges a long time ago." He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. "What do I do now?" "Find a therapist," I said, "not as punishment, because it's the most useful thing I can tell you. Figure out the difference between what you thought you were owed and what you actually want to build." I stood up. "Call me when you've talked to someone. Call me when you've started to understand what kind of man you want to be that isn't this version." I put my hand on his shoulder for a moment, just a moment. The way you touch something you are not done loving but need, for now, to set down. "I'm not done being your father. I'm done being your resource. We're going to have to learn what that difference looks like." I went inside and closed the door. The sale closed on a Thursday in October. I signed the papers at my kitchen table. I took one photograph with me. Frances and me at Shenandoah, the year Aaron turned 8. "She is laughing at something," I said. I don't remember what I said. I remember the way she looked. The rest came with me to a 2-bedroom condominium in Virginia Beach, close enough to the coast that I can see water from the kitchen window in the mornings. I paid cash. My overhead is modest. My mornings are entirely my own. Aaron called in December. He had a therapist, was going twice a week, was living in a furnished studio in Charlottesville, smaller than my old study. He said he was working on understanding the difference between what he'd believed he was owed and what he actually needed to earn. He said it was harder than he'd expected. I told him it usually was. I told him to come see me after the new year. Come alone. Not to fix anything, not to explain, just to come. We'd get breakfast somewhere. He said, "Okay." On a Friday morning in January, I sat on my balcony with coffee that was still hot and watched the Atlantic do what the Atlantic does: move and change and remain completely itself, regardless of what is happening on the shore. Frances would have named the exact shade of gray-blue the water was that morning. She would have been right about the name. I have been thinking, since that dinner party in August, about what I should have understood sooner. Not about Aaron and Whitney. Not about Reginald and his tape measure. About myself. About the years I spent absorbing things quietly and calling it patience when what it actually was avoidance. The harder version of love is the one where you say the thing that needs to be said before it calcifies into damage. I kept choosing the easier version. I kept thinking there would be more time. Your dignity is not a negotiating position. It is not something you offer in exchange for peace at a dinner table. It is the foundation, and a foundation, if you do not protect it, will eventually be used as someone else's floor. I should have known that a long time ago. Frances knew it. She said it once, sideways, looking at the wall. She let me find my way to it myself. I got here. That has to count for something.